They said the story of Greece was simple, a tale of marble and myth, of gods and philosophers, of heroes carved in stone. That the Greeks were born in one spark of brilliance, rising from chaos to create civilization itself. But what if the truth is far older? What if the Greek story didn't begin in temples or battles, but in blood? For centuries, historians tried to trace where the Greeks truly came from. Were they the descendants of a single ancient people, or the product of countless migrations, invasions, and exchanges, a mosaic rather than a statue? The textbooks once gave an answer. They said that around 1200 BC, everything collapsed. Palaces burned, writing disappeared, and from the ashes, the Greeks were born anew. The old world died. A new one took its place. Clean, simple, convenient. But DNA doesn't follow myths. It keeps records that stories forget. In the last 2 decades, scientists have turned bones into time machines, extracting fragments of genomes from teeth and skeletons buried for thousands of years. And what they've uncovered inside those ancient Greek graves has rewritten everything we thought we knew. Because the bloodline of Greece never broke. From the farmers who first planted wheat in the Aegean hills 9,000 years ago, to the Minoan traders of Crete, to the Mycenaean kings who built Europe's first palaces, the genes tell one unbroken story of survival, adaptation, and rebirth. A story that stretches from the mountains of Anatolia to the plains of the Caucasus, from the wind-swept steppes of Eastern Europe to the marble courtyards of Athens. It's a story written not in ink, but in chromosomes. And it tells us that the Greeks, those who speak the language of Homer, who walk beneath the same sun as their ancestors, are carrying within them the memory of civilizations long thought extinct. But to understand how deep that memory runs, we must begin not in the age of heroes, but in the age before history. Long before marble temples or written words, before the first myths took shape under starlit skies, the land that would become Greece was silent, wild, untamed, and empty of cities. Then, around 7000 BC, something extraordinary happened. Across the Aegean Sea came small wooden boats carrying people who changed the course of European history. They were farmers, migrants from Anatolia, and they brought more than seeds. They brought a revolution. These were the first Greeks, though they never called themselves that. They arrived with wheat and barley, goats and sheep, clay and fire. But hidden within their bones was something far enduring, the foundation of Greek DNA. Geneticists call them the Neolithic settlers, but their legacy is older than any empire that followed. From DNA extracted from Thessaly, the Peloponnese, and the islands of Crete and Euboea, scientists have found lineages, mitochondrial haplogroups H, J, and T, Y DNA markers like G2A and J2, the same genetic signatures still carried by modern Greeks today. It means that when a child is born in Athens or Crete, they carry echoes of those first farmers who once looked across the Aegean, watching the sunrise from the east, bringing life to barren soil. These weren't conquerors or warriors. They were builders, families who settled, sowed, and stayed. They built homes of mud brick and stone, buried their dead beneath their floors, and carved small figurines of women and animals, symbols of fertility and continuity. Every layer of soil beneath their villages still carries pollen grains of the crops they planted and fragments of the DNA that would one day define a nation. For thousands of years, their descendants remained on the same soil, their diet recorded in the calcium of their teeth, their movement traced through isotope analysis, their lives steady, rooted, unbroken. It's easy to forget them, these nameless farmers, because history remembers kings, not cultivators.
But science doesn't play favorites. It tells us plainly, before heroes and philosophers, there were farmers. Before Athens, there was the field. And before the idea of Greek, there was blood. A lineage that began not with conquest, but with cultivation. This was the first layer of Greek identity, planted in the soil of the Aegean nearly 9,000 years ago. And while centuries would bury their names beneath myth and empire, their DNA endured, waiting for the next great chapter to rise from the sea. Because not long after, another people appeared. Artists, traders, sailors, builders of palaces and dreamers of the divine. Their civilization would become Europe's first, and for a time, its brightest.
When the sun rose over the island of Crete around 2600 BC, it lit the marble courtyards of a civilization unlike any the world had ever seen. The Minoans, named after the mythical King Minos, were Europe's first great architects of beauty and order. Their palaces shimmered with frescoes of dolphins, dancers, and sacred bulls. Their ships ruled the Aegean, carrying olive oil, wine, and art to every corner of the Mediterranean. To the rest of the ancient world, they seemed almost divine, a people born from sea foam, untouched by war or time. But who were they really? For centuries, archaeologists searched for their origins. Were they Egyptian colonists, Phoenician traders? Were they outsiders who brought civilization to the islands? The colors on their walls, blues like papyrus, yellows like desert sun, spoke of Egypt. Their art echoed the Near East. To 19th century scholars, this meant one thing. The Minoans weren't truly European. They were foreign. But DNA had a different story to tell. In 2017, a team led by Dr. Yosef Lazaridis at Harvard University extracted ancient genomes from Minoan skeletons, men, women, and children buried beneath the ruins of Knossos and Lassithi. What they found was astonishing. The Minoans weren't outsiders. They were the direct descendants of the first Greek farmers, those same Neolithic settlers from Anatolia who had crossed the Aegean 4,000 years earlier. Their genetic code showed continuity, not replacement, not invasion, but evolution. Around 80% of their ancestry traced back to those early farmers. The rest came from small migrations from the east, from populations related to the Caucasus and Iran. A subtle thread of DNA that would later shape all Bronze Age civilizations. But what the study proved most clearly was this. The Minoans were native to the Aegean. They weren't the children of Egypt or Mesopotamia. They were the heirs of the soil beneath their feet. Yet their brilliance carried a mystery. They wrote in a language no one can yet read, Linear A, a script of lines and symbols carved into clay, still silent after 3,500 years. Their religion, their songs, their voices, all lost to time. Only their art remains, painted on palace walls where women in flowing skirts face charging bulls and dolphins leap across ocean blue. And though they built without weapons and ruled without walls, their legacy wouldn't last forever. Because across the Aegean, another people was watching. They were harder, hungrier, more warlike, and they carried with them a whisper of ancestry from far beyond Greece. Soon their worlds would collide, and from that collision, the next great civilization of Greece would be born, one forged not in peace, but in power. By 1700 BC, the Aegean was no longer ruled by peace. Stone walls rose where palaces once stood open to the sun. The music of the sea gave way to the clang of bronze and the march of soldiers. The Mycenaeans had arrived. They came from the Greek mainland, from citadels like Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos. Their cities built like fortresses,
their kings buried with swords, gold masks, and power carved into their bones. To the poets of later ages, they were the heroes of legend: Agamemnon, Achilles, Odysseus, the first Greeks to bear names that history would remember. But how did these warriors relate to the peaceful Minoans across the sea? Were they conquerors or cousins? For generations, historians argued both sides. Then, ancient DNA stepped in. In the same 2017 Harvard study that sequenced Minoan genomes, scientists also analyzed DNA from Mycenaean skeletons, warriors, nobles, and commoners buried beneath the ruins of Knossos and Lassithi. What they found stunned the world. Genetically, the Mycenaeans and Minoans were almost identical. Both descended largely from the same Neolithic farmers and shared that same Caucasus-Iran-related ancestry. The difference was small, but it changed everything. The Mycenaeans carried something the Minoans did not: a faint signal in their DNA, a whisper from the distant plains of Eastern Europe, the steppe ancestry. It was subtle, between 4 and 16%, but unmistakable, a trace of the Yamnaya, the nomadic herders from the Pontic Caspian steppe who swept across Europe between 3000 and 2500 BC. They brought horses, chariots, and most fatefully, language, the Indo-European tongue that would one day become Greek. But this wasn't an invasion. It was something more complex and more powerful. A few elite men, riders, traders, warriors, entered the Aegean, married local women, and rose to prominence. Geneticists call it elite dominance, a revolution not of blood, but of hierarchy. A handful of outsiders shifting the language, the culture, and eventually, the course of civilization itself. And in 2015, archaeologists found proof. In a grave near Pylos, they unearthed a man buried around 1450 BC, the Griffin warrior. His tomb overflowed with treasures, gold rings, weapons, and a seal stone so detailed it defied belief. At first glance, everything about him screamed Minoan. His art, his wealth, his burial style, but his DNA whispered otherwise. He was Mycenaean, a blend of Aegean farmer blood and that faint pulse of steppe ancestry. This was the turning point, the biological birth of the Greek identity as we know it. From that union of Minoan artistry and Mycenaean power emerged the roots of classical Greece: language, myth, and structure, all born from a fusion of worlds. But power has a price, and beneath the splendor of their citadels, the Mycenaeans carried the seeds of collapse, seeds that would one day burn their palaces to ash and bury their names in silence.
Around 1200 BC, the lights of the Bronze Age began to go out. Palaces burned, cities fell silent, writing vanished, trade routes crumbled. Across the Aegean, civilization itself seemed to disappear. For centuries, historians blamed a single cause: the Dorian invasion. According to the textbooks, new tribes swept down from the north, rough, warlike people who destroyed the Mycenaean palaces, ended their rule, and ushered in centuries of darkness. The elegant world of kings and scribes replaced by chaos and ruin. The Mycenaeans were said to have vanished, their bloodline erased, their culture forgotten. It was a neat story, one that fit the ruins perfectly. But the bones beneath those ruins told another tale. When geneticists began extracting DNA from late Bronze Age and early Iron Age burials across Greece and Crete, they found something no one expected.
There was no sign of mass replacement, no genetic rupture. The people before the collapse were genetically the same as those who lived after. The Mycenaean bloodline, the farmers, warriors, and sailors of the Aegean never disappeared. They endured. The so-called Dorian invasion, it turns out, was likely a myth, a story invented by later Greeks to explain a past they didn't understand. The real collapse wasn't caused by outsiders, it came from within. Archaeology and science together began to reveal the cracks, years of drought and famine, trade routes broken, palaces competing for dwindling resources, and perhaps most hauntingly, plague. In 2020, researchers found traces of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the plague, in Bronze Age teeth from Crete and the Peloponnese, dated just before the collapse. A silent killer that spread faster than armies. No invaders were needed. The world simply unraveled, not with conquest, but with hunger, disease, and revolt. The fall of the Mycenaeans wasn't the death of a people, it was the death of an order. And when the fires finally cooled, those who remained rebuilt, simpler homes, humbler tools, a quieter world rising from the ashes. But their blood stayed the same. And from that surviving bloodline, a new Greece would slowly emerge, one that spoke a more refined tongue, sang new myths, and remembered the heroes of the past as legends, not ancestors. Because what we call ancient Greece, the Greece of philosophers and poets, wasn't a beginning at all. It was a rebirth, a civilization rising again from the genetic ashes of its own past. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell over the same mountains that once held Mycenaean kings. Rome came and called it a province. Byzantium came and called it a faith. Ottomans came and called it a conquest. But through every wave of invasion and empire, one truth remained buried beneath the soil, waiting to be rediscovered. The Greek bloodline never broke. In 2017, the Harvard study, led by Dr. Iosif Lazaridis, confirmed what the bones had been whispering for millennia. Modern Greeks share between 70% and 80% of their DNA with the Mycenaeans who lived 3,500 years ago. The same genes that built palaces and composed myths still flow through the veins of those walking the streets of Athens today. Yes, history changed their languages, their gods, their rulers, but their blood remembered. Even the great migrations of Slavs during the 6th and 7th centuries, once thought to have rewritten Greece's ancestry, barely left a trace in the genome. The uDNA haplogroups that defined the earliest Aegean farmers, J2, E1b1b, and G2a, still dominate the modern Greek landscape. It wasn't conquest that shaped them, it was continuity, transformation without extinction. The Greek genome is not a single statue, it's a mosaic, each piece shaped by time, each color borrowed from those who passed through, but together forming a single familiar face, the same face that might have gazed upon the fires of Troy, the same voice that once whispered prayers in Linear B. It means that the idea of Greece, the feeling of Greekness, isn't trapped in marble or myth. It's alive, breathing, evolving. A civilization that never died, only changed its language, its clothes, its name. And as science continues to unearth new genomes, from the bones of forgotten children in Knossos to the warriors of ancient battles in Sicily, one thing becomes clear. The story of Greece is not over. It's still being written, in the lab, in the soil, and in the blood of those who carry it forward. Because identity isn't about purity, it's about persistence. And in that, Greece stands eternal. The ruins may crumble, the languages may fade, but the DNA endures, quietly, recording everything we've forgotten, waiting to be heard again. And somewhere beneath the olive trees, another skeleton sleeps, another sentence in the story of humanity, waiting for science to read it. If you're fascinated by the hidden histories written in our DNA, by civilizations reborn through science, by the secrets of who we were and what we've become, then join us. Subscribe to the channel, and together we'll uncover the next chapter buried beneath the earth, one genome, one civilization, one truth at a time. Because the past isn't gone, it's alive in our blood.